All right, what's up, everybody? So one topic that I've been wanting to talk about for a while on the channel is training volume and my perspective on it, and the perspective that I encourage you to take on training volume. So of course, my past couple videos were addressing some claims that were made about the natural community. I felt the need to address those claims. I don't plan on making any more of those videos unless I need to. So when it comes to today's topic, of course, like I mentioned in the intro, it is going to be on training volume. A lot of the time with training volume, a lot of people are confused on it and they don't truly understand it until years into their lifting career, and it can cause a lot of stress and anxiety when you're a newer lifter because you cannot figure out how much volume you need and nobody tells it to you. It's one of those things where you feel like people are hiding the truth from you. But as somebody that is a more experienced lifter, I don't want to tell you guys exactly what volume to do because that wouldn't be the right way to go about it, because it is individual, and I'll touch on this later. But the reason why nobody can tell you how much volume to do is because it's individual. And the reason why you can't figure out how much volume you need is because you're approaching your programming and your training from, I don't want to say the incorrect perspective, but you're approaching it from a perspective that will not allow you to actually find how much volume you do need. If your main question when designing your programs and training in the gym is how much volume do I need, then your program's just going to adapt to whatever number you want it to be, or whatever number you feel like you hear the most from the most trustworthy person online. When it comes to actually finding how much volume you need, the perspective that will allow you to do this is looking at other variables first. A good one for this would be intensity, so how hard you train. The reason why so many people in our generations, the lifters of the past, say 5 to 7 years, the reason why so many people are doing high volume and putting out this advice like, oh, only train your last set to failure, or make sure to keep a couple reps in reserve so your stimulus to fatigue ratio is better. The reason why people talk about these things, even though they've been proven to be incorrect, is so their training can adapt to how much volume they feel like they need. It's actually the other way around. I don't want you guys to take a specific number of volume, a specific number of sets a week, and reverse engineer your training to meet that arbitrary number, because that's not how volume works. The perspective that I'd encourage you to take is, how many times a week do I need to train this muscle hard to see growth? So the way I see it is, if you're doing a 4-day split and you're training, say, an upper lower where every muscle's getting hit twice a week, instead of saying, okay, well, an upper lower, I'm only doing 2 sets per session, so 4 sets per week, that doesn't meet my volume requirements. I would encourage you to say, and look at it from this perspective, you're hitting chest hard twice a week. Don't look at that it's 2 sets a session yet. Don't look at it being 4 sets a session yet. That isn't useful information yet. And that could be because 4 or 5 sets a week is what you need personally to grow. The volume is always going to be a secondary variable. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm not saying to put it on the back burner or not pay attention to it, but you have to figure out the other variables first. If you're training 10 to 20 sets a week, let's say you're on the upper side of that, like a lot of people that have volume anxiety do. Let's say you're doing 15 to 20 sets a week for chest. I'm not saying that can't work, but what are the odds that you're going to get the more important variables like proximity to failure and technique down before you go into 15 to 20 sets a week? It's pretty slim, and you're going to be somebody that leaves reps in the tanks, I can't speak, it's too early for me. Leaves reps in the tank in your first few sets so you have the energy to go all out on your final set. And in reality, those first few sets you're doing aren't actually productive sets, and it's not high quality volume. So in reality, one, you're probably actually doing low volume if you account for the stimulus that you're getting per set. And I hope that relieves some of that stress you have about volume in your training. When it comes to figuring out the right amount of volume that you need, what I would say is train each set as hard as you possibly can. Train each set like it's your last. Train your first set like it's your last set and your only set for that muscle group. And I'm not telling you guys to do HIT training where you're doing 1 or 2 sets a week, because I also think that's nonsense and that's a false conclusion. Maybe I'll talk about that in the future. But when it comes to something like training intensity and your proximity to failure, that has to come first. And once you guys actually start taking that first set just as seriously as your last set on that lift for that day, you'll realize that every set you do after that is just less and less stimulative. And that's a good thing, because it means you got stimulus, and a lot of it, from that first set. And that's where you can realize this is how people get away with low volume. They cut the fluff and the pump of the 2 to 3 sets with a few reps in reserve prior to that final all-out set. They get onto that in the first set, and now their second set is almost like icing on the cake in a way. If you need to do a second set, then go for it. I do 2 sets on basically every lift I do. Sometimes it's 1, sometimes it's 3. Occasionally, like very rarely, I'd say I do 4, and I don't really do 5 sets on anything. So that's the perspective I want you guys to take. How many times a week am I training this muscle hard? Volume will come after that. If you're doing, say, even a very minimalist routine where you're doing an upper lower 4 times a week and you're just doing 1 set per lift and you're training that muscle twice a week and you're doing 2 sets a week, that's pretty minimalist. But what I'd say is from there, you can at least learn what intensity you need and learn how to really train hard. I'd even argue that something like frequency is more important for volume because your split has to match what your lifestyle and what your preferences are. Once you have your split down and how hard you train down, now volume actually becomes a viable factor that you can fluctuate based on what you need to do. So if you're not recovering properly, then you probably have to tone down your volume a little bit. And that's a good thing because now you can actually figure out for once how much volume you truly need. Let's say you're not making progress, but your intensity and your frequency are in a solid spot. That's a perfect sign that you need to increase your volume. Once you have the foundation of your training down, now volume is of importance. But before you have that, volume means nothing. And that's why nobody can tell you how much volume you need. And that's why you feel like you've been lied to and confused about training for so long. And that's how I felt for years. I would always try and look up how much volume do I need for chest to grow a week. And people always give you these numbers, but the numbers never actually make a change in your training because that's a secondary variable. It can only matter once you have everything else down, and then from there, it's individual. So I know that's a cookie cutter, boring answer, but I hope my perspective and I hope my explanation of that actually motivates you to try to nail down your proximity to failure, your technique, and your frequency first, and then volume will actually become an important factor that you can fluctuate as needed. So of course, this is just a quick little intro video. I'll probably have more videos talking about this in the future. If you have any questions that you want to see in that video, please let me know in the comments and I'll make sure to include those topics and those questions in that video that I can hopefully make a bit longer and a bit more in depth. I know it's a little surface level today. So with that said, I have to head out. I will see you guys in the next one.